Let's be real. Most of these self-made billionaires are just man-children in $5,000 suits who never learned that acting like a prick doesn't make the espresso brew any faster. Silas was a special kind of prick. He walked into the Gilded Bean at 6:05 a.m., smelling of expensive gin and looking for someone to make himself feel bigger than he actually was. Welcome to the channel. Today's story isn't your average rags-to-riches fairy tale. It's a deep dive into what happens when a man who thinks he owns the world realizes he's actually just a tenant in a building owned by the girl he just humiliated. Before we get into the steam and the coffee grounds, I'd do us a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, like the video, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love the global community we're building here. Steam. It was the first thing Clara felt every morning at 4:30 a.m. The wand was hissing a steady, high-pitched scream as Clara cleaned off the milk build-up. Her lower back ached with a dull, familiar thrum, the kind of pain you only get after standing on industrial tile for 8 hours straight. She didn't look up when the bell over the door chimed. She just focused on the weight of the portafilter in her hand, the smell of metallic cleaning solution still clinging to her skin. Then Silas arrived. He didn't bark. When the latte Clara handed him wasn't the exact temperature his ego required, he didn't ask for a remake. He simply tilted the cup. The liquid was hot, dark, and sticky as it soaked into Clara's apron, but she didn't flinch. It wasn't until Silas stepped closer to deliver a final insult, his face inches from hers, that his eyes snagged on the plastic tag pinned to her chest. Clara Ames-Lowell. The color didn't just drain from his face, it evaporated. He didn't apologize. He backed away so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet, his hands shaking, as he realized that the girl he just drenched in caffeine was the only person alive who could sign the papers to take his entire company away from him. Clara's alarm went off at 4:15 a.m., which meant she'd gotten maybe 4 hours of sleep if you were being generous. The apartment she shared with her roommate Jenna was cold enough that she could see her breath when she sat up. The radiator had been broken for 3 weeks, and their landlord, a guy named Vernon, who wore the same stained polo shirt to every interaction, had stopped returning calls. Jenna was asleep on the couch in the living room, wrapped in 2 blankets and a winter coat. She'd given Clara the bedroom when the eviction notice came. 21 days. That's all they had, unless Jenna could come up with 2 months back rent plus late fees. Clara had offered to cover it, but Jenna refused. Pride, or maybe shame. Probably both. Clara pulled on her work uniform. Black jeans that were starting to pill at the knees. A black t-shirt that smelled faintly of yesterday's espresso shots. And the apron she'd washed in the sink the night before because the laundromat cost $7 a load. She tied her hair back with a rubber band she'd found in the junk drawer and grabbed her keys. The Gilded Bean was a 40-minute subway ride from her apartment, which meant she had to leave by 4:50 if she wanted to be on time. The train at that hour was full of people who worked the jobs that kept the city running while everyone else slept. Custodians, bakers, hospital staff, delivery drivers. Nobody made eye contact. Everybody looked tired. Clara got off at the financial district stop and walked 3 blocks to the cafe. The Gilded Bean sat on the ground floor of a glass tower that housed law firms, hedge funds, and the kind of people who paid $12 for a latte because it came with foam art. The cafe itself was all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, the kind of place that tried very hard to look unpretentious while charging pretentious prices. She unlocked the back door at 5:28 a.m. Her manager, Dennis, was already there, counting the register. Dennis was 52, had worked in coffee for 30 years, and had the kind of back problems that came from lifting 50-pound bags of beans since he was 20. He nodded when Clara walked in. "Morning?" "Morning." That was the extent of their conversation. Dennis wasn't much of a talker before 7 a.m., and Clara appreciated that about him. She clocked in, tied her apron, and started the opening routine. First, the grinder. She dumped yesterday's stale grounds into the compost bin, wiped down the burrs with a dry cloth, and dialed in the grind size. The beans they used were single origin from Guatemala, roasted dark enough to cut through milk, but light enough to avoid tasting burnt. Clara adjusted the grind, finer by half a notch. The humidity was up today, which meant extraction would run faster. And next, the espresso machine. She purged the group heads, flushed the lines, and ran a blank shot to warm up the portafilter. The machine was a La Marzocco Linea, the kind of equipment that cost more than Clara made in 6 months. She'd learned to operate it the way some people learn to play an instrument. Repetition, muscle memory, respect for the mechanics. By 5:50, the cafe was ready. Clara unlocked the front door, flipped the sign to open, and stood behind the counter, waiting. The first customer was a regular, a woman in scrubs who ordered a double espresso, no sugar, and left a $2 tip. The second was a college kid who asked for oat milk and apologized 3 times for being indecisive. And the third was a guy in a suit who didn't say please or thank you and left his credit card on the counter like Clara was supposed to know it was there. Then Silas walked in. You could tell a lot about a person by the way they entered a room. Silas entered like he was owed something. He didn't hold the door for the woman behind him. He didn't wipe his shoes on the mat. He walked straight to the counter, pulled out his phone, and stood there scrolling while Clara waited. She gave him 10 seconds. Then, "What can I get for you?" He didn't look up. "Latte, oat milk, 140 degrees, no foam." Clara rang him up. "That'll be $6.75. He tapped his phone against the card reader without acknowledging her, then went to sit at a table by the window. Clara started making the drink. She steamed the oat milk to 140. Exactly 140. Because she'd learned that people like Silas would send it back if it was even 2 degrees off. She poured it into the espresso, skipped the foam art because he'd said no foam, and brought it over to his table. Latte, oat milk, 140 degrees. Silas picked up the cup, took a sip, and made a face like she'd just served him poison. "This is cold." Clara kept her voice even. "It's 140 degrees. That's what you ordered." "It's cold," he repeated, louder this time. "I don't know what kind of operation you're running here, but this is unacceptable." Dennis glanced over from the register, but didn't intervene. He'd seen this before. They all had. "I can remake it," Clara said. Silas stood up. He was tall, maybe 6'2", and he used that height the way some men did, as a tool to make other people feel small. He stepped close enough that Clara could smell the gin on his breath, the expensive cologne that couldn't quite cover it up. "You know what?" he said. "Forget it." Then he tilted the cup. The latte hit Clara square in the chest. It soaked through her apron, her shirt, into her bra. The liquid was hot enough to sting, but not hot enough to burn. She stood there, not moving, while Silas watched her with a look that was half disgust, half satisfaction. "Maybe next time you'll get it right," he said. He stepped closer, leaning in like he was about to say something else, something worse. And that's when he saw it. The name tag pinned to her apron. Clara Ames-Lowell. For a moment, Silas just stared. Then his face went white. Not pale. White. What the kind of white you get when your body realizes you've made a mistake so catastrophic that there's no walking it back. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Clara didn't say anything. She just looked at him, coffee dripping onto the floor, waiting. Silas backed up so fast, he knocked into the chair behind him. His hands were shaking. He tried to say something else, but nothing came out. Then he turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving his briefcase on the table. Dennis came over with a towel. "You okay?" "Yeah," Clara said. "I'm fine." She wasn't, but that was beside the point. Clara changed her shirt in the bathroom. She kept a spare in her locker for exactly this kind of situation, and went back to work. The morning rush came and went, 50 drinks in 90 minutes, a line out the door, and the espresso machine screaming the whole time. By 9 a.m., the cafe had quieted down enough that Clara could take her break. She sat at the table where Silas had been. His briefcase was still there, unopened. Dennis had moved it to the lost-and-found shelf behind the counter, but Clara asked if she could take a look first. "Might be a phone number inside," she said. "So we can call him?" Dennis shrugged. "Go ahead." The briefcase was leather, expensive, the kind that cost 4 figures. Clara opened it carefully. Inside, a laptop, a charging cable, a folder full of contracts, and, tucked into the side pocket, a small black drive about the size of a USB stick. She pulled out the drive. It was unmarked, no label, no logo, just solid black metal with a rubber cap. Clara should have left it alone. She knew that. But something about the way Silas had looked at her name tag, the way he'd gone white and stumbled out of the cafe like he'd seen a ghost, it didn't sit right. She pocketed the drive. Jenna was awake when Clara got home that night. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her laptop, her face lit by the blue glow of the screen. "Hey," Clara said. "Hey." Jenna didn't look up. Clara dropped her bag by the door and went to the fridge. There wasn't much inside. Half a carton of eggs, some wilted spinach, a bottle of hot sauce. She grabbed the eggs and started making dinner. "You eat today?" Clara asked. "Yeah." That was a lie, but Clara didn't push it. She scrambled the eggs, split them onto 2 plates, and brought one over to Jenna. "Thanks," Jenna said quietly. They ate in silence for a while. Then Jenna spoke. I talked to Vernon today." Clara looked up. "And?" "He said if I don't have the money by Friday, he's filing the eviction paperwork." "That's illegal. He has to give you 30 days. He doesn't care." Clara set down her fork. "I can cover it." "No." "Jenna, I said no." Jenna's voice cracked. "I'm not taking your money. You've already done enough." Clara wanted to argue, but she knew it wouldn't help. Jenna had been her roommate for 3 years, her friend for longer than that. She was proud, stubborn, and drowning in a hole she hadn't dug herself. Her last job had laid her off 2 months ago, and the unemployment checks weren't enough to cover rent in a city that didn't care if you couldn't keep up. After dinner, Clara went to her room and closed the door. She pulled out the black drive she'd taken from Silas's briefcase and turned it over in her hands. There was a part of her A small, desperate part that wondered what was on it, wondered if it was worth something, wondered if it could help Jenna. She plugged it into her laptop. The drive was encrypted. A password screen popped up. White text on a black background. Enter passcode. Clara tried a few obvious combinations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Password, Silas's name. Nothing worked. After the fifth attempt, a new message appeared. 2 attempts remaining before data wipe. She unplugged the drive and sat back. Whatever was on there, it was important enough to protect. Important enough that Silas had left it behind in his panic. Clara Googled his name, Silas Crane. The first result was his LinkedIn profile, CEO of Crane Capital Management, and a mid-sized investment firm that handled wealth management for high-net-worth clients. The second result was a news article from 3 months ago. Crane Capital under investigation for tax fraud allegations. The third was an op-ed piece calling him the poster child for unchecked greed in the finance sector. Clara kept reading. Apparently, Crane Capital had been accused of using offshore accounts to hide client assets and avoid paying taxes. The investigation was ongoing, but no charges had been filed yet. Silas's firm was still operating, still managing hundreds of millions of dollars. And Clara was holding what might be the evidence that could bury him. She looked at the drive again. Then she looked at the eviction notice taped to Jenna's door. It would be easy. She could find a buyer, some journalist, some competitor, but someone who'd pay good money for whatever was on this drive, enough to cover Jenna's rent, enough to keep them both afloat for a while. But Clara didn't do easy. The next morning, Clara called in sick to work. She told Dennis she had food poisoning, which wasn't entirely a lie. Her stomach had been in knots since she'd found the drive. She took the subway downtown to the address listed on Crane Capital's website, a sleek glass building in Midtown, the kind with a doorman and a lobby that smelled like expensive flowers. Clara walked in, wearing jeans and a hoodie, looking exactly like someone who didn't belong. The receptionist at the front desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Silas Crane." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I have something of his." The receptionist's expression didn't change. "I'm sorry, but Mr. McCrane doesn't take walk-ins. If you'd like to leave a message..." Clara pulled out the black drive and set it on the desk. The receptionist's eyes went wide. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly into it, and hung up. "Someone will be down in a moment." 2 minutes later, a man in a grey suit appeared. He didn't introduce himself. He just looked at the drive, then at Clara. "Come with me." He led her to an elevator, swiped a key card, and pressed the button for the 18th floor. They rode up in silence. When the doors opened, Clara was led down a hallway, lined with glass-walled conference rooms, each one filled with people in suits staring at spreadsheets. The man stopped at a corner office and knocked. "Come in." Silas was sitting behind a massive desk, his back to the door, staring out at the city. He didn't turn around when Clara walked in. "Leave us," he said. The man in the grey suit left, closing the door behind him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Silas turned his chair around. He looked worse than he had at the cafe. Tired, unshaven, his tie loosened, like he'd been wearing it for 2 days straight. "You could have sold that," he said, nodding at the drive in Clara's hand. "I know. So why didn't you?" Clara didn't have a good answer to that. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't want to say it out loud. Because selling the drive would have made her the same kind of person Silas was, someone who took shortcuts, who bent the rules, who did whatever it took to get ahead. "I'm not interested in destroying people," Clara said, "even people who probably deserve it." Silas laughed, but it was hollow. "You have no idea what's on that drive, do you?" "I can guess." He stood up and walked over to the window, hands in his pockets. "My firm is 3 months away from bankruptcy. I've been hiding losses for 2 years, moving money around, cooking the books just to keep the lights on. That drive has all of it. Every transaction, every account, every lie I've told to keep this place afloat. If that gets out, I'm done. Prison, lawsuits, the whole thing." "Then maybe you should turn yourself in." Silas turned to look at her. "Is that what you do?" "I don't know," Clara said honestly. "But I do know that throwing coffee at people because you're scared doesn't make the problem go away." He flinched at that. "Good." Clara set the drive on his desk. "I'm giving this back because it's the right thing to do, not because you deserve it." She turned to leave, but Silas spoke again. "Wait." Clara stopped. "Who are you?" he asked. "Really?" Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, just a little. "Someone you should have been nicer to." She walked out. Clara went back to work the next day. The Gilded Bean was busy, the espresso machine was loud, and her feet hurt by the end of her shift. Everything was exactly the same as it had been before Silas walked in and turned her life sideways, except it wasn't, because when Clara got home that night, there was a letter waiting for her. It had been slipped under the door, no postage, no return address, just her name written in neat handwriting on the front. She opened it. Inside was a check for $10,000, signed by Silas Crane, and a note, "For your roommate's rent. Consider it an apology." Clara stared at the check. Then she called Jenna. "You're not going to believe this." 2 weeks later, Clara got a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Miss Ames-Lowell? This is Richard Whitmore. I'm the general counsel for the Ames-Lowell Group." Clara's stomach dropped. She hadn't heard that name in years. Hadn't wanted to. "How did you get this number?" "Your grandmother left instructions," Whitmore said. "In the event of certain circumstances, we were to contact you. Those circumstances have now occurred." "What circumstances?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss this over the phone. Would you be available to meet tomorrow at our offices?" Clara wanted to say no. She wanted to hang up, delete the number, and pretend this conversation never happened. But she didn't. "Fine," she said. "Where?" The Ames-Lowell Group had offices in the same building as Crane Capital. Different floor, same elevator. Clara rode up to the 23rd floor the next morning, wearing the nicest outfit she owned, a black dress she'd bought at a thrift store and a pair of flats that pinched her toes. Richard Whitmore was waiting for her in the lobby. He was older, maybe 70, with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than Clara's monthly rent. He shook her hand. "Thank you for coming." He led her to a conference room where 5 other people were already seated. Lawyers, accountants, people whose job titles Clara didn't understand. Whitmore gestured to an empty chair at the head of the table. "Please sit." Clara sat. Whitmore opened a folder and slid a document across the table. "I'll get straight to the point. Your grandmother, Evelyn Ames-Lowell, passed away 6 months ago. In her will, she left the controlling shares of the Ames-Lowell Group to you." Clara blinked. I'm sorry, what? The Ames-Lowell Group is a private equity firm that manages a portfolio worth approximately $4.7 billion. It holds majority stakes in 17 companies, including Crane Capital Management. As of this morning, you are the principal shareholder and acting chair of the board. Clara's brain couldn't process the words fast enough. Why me? I didn't even know her. Your grandmother was very specific in her instructions, Whitmore said. She believed that wealth without accountability was dangerous, and she included a morality clause in the company charter. Any executive found to be engaging in fraudulent activity could be subject to an immediate audit and removal. 3 days ago, we received an anonymous tip regarding Silas Crane's activities at Crane Capital. We've been investigating since then. He slid another document across the table. It was a financial audit, pages and pages of numbers and transactions. Clara recognized some of the account numbers. They matched the ones she'd seen when she'd briefly opened Silas's encrypted drive. We've confirmed that Mr. Crane has been engaging in tax fraud, embezzlement, and misrepresentation of assets, Whitmore continued. Under the morality clause, we have the authority to remove him from his position and dissolve Crane Capital's operating license. Clara looked up. You're shutting him down? Not yet. We wanted to consult with you first. As the principal shareholder, the decision is yours. Clara sat back in her chair. She thought about Silas walking into the Gilded Bean, smelling like gin and entitlement. She thought about the coffee soaking through her shirt, the look on his face when he'd seen her name tag. She thought about the check he'd sent, the $10,000 that had kept Jenna from losing her apartment. What happens to the people who work for him? Clara asked. The assistants, the analysts, the people who didn't do anything wrong. Whitmore consulted his notes. Crane Capital employs 43 people. If we dissolve the firm, they'd be entitled to severance packages and job placement assistance. Most would likely find work within 6 months. And Silas? He'd face criminal charges. Prison time, most likely. Clara closed her eyes. She could do it. She could bury him, take everything he had, make him feel as small as he'd tried to make her feel. It would be easy. It would be justified. But it wouldn't be right. I want a third option, Clara said. Whitmore raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. We don't dissolve the firm. We remove Silas and install new leadership, someone clean, someone who'll run it properly. We give the employees a chance to keep their jobs, and Silas cooperates with the authorities, turns himself in, and pleads guilty to the fraud charges. No dragging it out, no appeals, no trying to weasel out of it. One of the lawyers spoke up. That's a significant risk. If he refuses, then we bury him, Clara said. But we give him the chance to do the right thing first. Whitmore studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll draft the terms. Silas came to the Ames-Lowell offices 3 days later. He looked even worse than the last time Clara had seen him. Thinner, grayer, like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Whitmore led him into the conference room where Clara was waiting. Silas sat down across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. You knew, he said finally. When I threw that coffee at you, you knew who you were. No, Clara said. I found out 2 weeks ago, same as you. Silas laughed bitterly. So it was just dumb luck. You were actually just a barista. I'm still a barista. Not anymore, you're not. You're a billionaire. You own half the city. Clara shook her head. I don't want to own anything. I just want people to stop acting like the world owes them something because they have money. Silas looked down at his hands. I'm sorry for what I did at the cafe. I was having a bad morning, and I took it out on you. That was wrong. Yeah, Clara said. It was. Whitmore cleared his throat. Mr. Crane, we've prepared an agreement. If you sign, you'll resign from Crane Capital immediately, cooperate fully with federal investigators, and plead guilty to all charges. In exchange, we'll recommend a reduced sentence and provide job placement assistance for your employees. Silas read through the documents slowly. When he finished, he looked up at Clara. Why are you doing this? You could destroy me. You should destroy me. Maybe, Clara said, but I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in making sure this doesn't happen again. To anyone. Silas picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. He signed the document, slid it back across the table, and stood up. For what it's worth, he said quietly, you're a better person than I am. I know, Clara said. He left without another word. Silas pleaded guilty to 6 counts of tax fraud and 2 counts of embezzlement. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole after 2. Crane Capital was restructured under new management, and all 43 employees kept their jobs. Clara stayed on as chair of the Ames-Lowell Group for 6 months. She used that time to implement new transparency policies, fund independent audits of every company in the portfolio, and establish a whistleblower protection program for employees who reported misconduct. Then she stepped down. She didn't want the job. She didn't want the money, the power, the responsibility. What she wanted was to go back to the Gilded Bean, to the smell of coffee grounds and the hiss of the steam wand, to the simple act of making something with her hands. But she kept the money, not for herself, for people like Jenna, people who worked hard and played by the rules and still couldn't make rent. Clara set up a fund, $100 million earmarked for rental assistance, job training, small business loans. She called it the Evelyn Ames-Lowell Foundation, after the grandmother she'd never met, but who'd apparently seen something in her worth preserving. Dennis gave her the morning shift back without asking questions. Clara showed up at 5:30 a.m., dialed in the grinder, and made coffee for people who didn't know her name or her story. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Because at the end of it all, Clara had learned something important. Having power didn't mean you had to use it to hurt people. Sometimes the strongest thing you could do was walk away, give someone a second chance. Choose to be kind when it would be easier to be cruel. The world didn't need more people like Silas. It needed more people who knew when to throw the coffee and when to clean up the mess instead. Clara didn't just win. She regained a legacy that was hers by right. And she did it without becoming the kind of person who throws coffee when they're stressed. It's a reminder that integrity is a currency that never loses its value, even when the market crashes. And if you've stuck with us through this whole journey, you're the reason we make these stories. Please subscribe and hit the like button. It's the best way to keep this channel alive. Leave a comment below. Did Silas get what he deserved, or was the board too easy on him? We'll be in the comment sections talking with you. Until the next story, stay sharp.